Hello everyone, this is research video number 7 in a series where I cover topics that I find interesting. So today we're going to be covering the topic of electrolytes in the human body, why they're important, and what they do. So diving right into it, I have some notes in front of me so I can refer to any technical terms or just ensure that I am providing the right information. But firstly, so what is an electrolyte? An electrolyte basically means that it is a particle that can dissolve into water, and as it dissolves, it charges electrically into, or it turns into electrical particles that can have an energetic charge, and these then become known as ions. So as it dissolves in water, it becomes ionized. And it can either dissolve into a positive ion, so a cation, or a negative ion called an anion. And so that's just what an electrolyte is. It dissolves into water and becomes electrically charged. And that's kind of the most basic definition of it. And you can test the strength of an electrolyte. So there's strong electrolytes, weak electrolytes, and then non-electrolytes. And you test it by putting just a beaker of water with your solution in it. It can be anything from sugar to potassium to magnesium, or any other kind of chemical compound. And then taking a battery, putting 2 wires onto that battery, sticking it into the water, and then also adding a light bulb onto that electrical circuit. And you can basically see how much electrical current can go through this entire circuit, and by how bright the light bulb is. And so you'll have solutions like sugar, which aren't soluble in water at all, so there's no ions being created, and so the light bulb won't turn on at all. But then you also have solutions like calcium, or like sodium chloride, which will make the light bulb very strong because they are very strong electrolytes, because the current will be passed through the ions in the water. So the main electrolytes that we have in our body are calcium, magnesium, potassium, and we have magnesium, potassium, calcium, and chloride. I think there's one more that's also very important, and it's sodium, of course. So before we move on, it's important to remember that around 50 to 75% of the human body is made up of water and other liquids. It's not 60% water, it's 60% of a mixture of liquids, including water and other salts or solutes. And so that's important because we want to maintain the correct amount of water balance within our body. So we want to always make sure that our body is constantly having a level amount of H2O surrounding our cells. So both in our cells and outside of our cells. So we want to have water in our cells so that it can regulate the transfer of the right nutrients or solutes like these electrolytes into the cell, but then that also the water can come out of the cells so that we can transfer out waste or anything that a cell does no longer wants inside of it, so waste. Now it's important to understand the process behind how this works. So water transfers throughout our body through a process called osmosis, and this is a naturally occurring process. So the water kind of just always is going to be seeking a area of lower water concentration. It's kind of like if you have 2 beakers of water, one is super full and one is half full, and you put like a straw in between the bottom of these 2 beakers, it's always going to try to level itself out. But sometimes it can't properly do that because the water may not know where to go, or because the electrolytes themselves are not at the equal or optimal levels, and so they might be pulling water out of areas where it shouldn't be. But the overall function of electrolytes, if they are balanced in your body, is to have a helpful regulation of the water, so that throughout your body, the cells are always going to have the proper amount of water within the cell and outside of the cell. So the water regulation is always going to be good. Now, going back to osmosis, osmosis happens through water being able to transfer through the cell's semi-permeable membrane, which means that only water and very specific particles can pass through the membrane, but a lot of other things can't. And so, again, water is very important so that your cells, the reason that the regulation of water is so important is because if you have too much water, your cells can expand and burst. And if you have too little, they can shrink and die. And so, like I also said, it also transfers the nutrients and removes waste from cells. So that's why it's very important. Let's see. Yeah, so going into more specifics about why now electrolytes are important and regulate this process. So it's the most important thing to remember is that electrolytes are directing the flow of water concentration within your body, or they assist in that flow. So they're basically assisting the osmosis process. So water is attracted to sodium or salts in our body. And so sodium is normally a particle that flows or lives outside of the cells. And so it's constantly going to attract water to come out of cells. So it regulates the proper flow of water out of cells and into the bloodstream so that it can be properly balanced outside. And then you also have within cells potassium. And potassium is also, water is also going to be attracted towards moving towards potassium. And potassium normally lives inside of cells. And so you have this directional pressure, and it's called osmotic pressure or osmosic pressure. And basically is just going to ensure that the body is having an accurately balanced level through that pushing or through that pulling of water by those two different particles. And so that's kind of like a natural balancing act that electrolytes have in the body. And then a common question will be if I do like a workout, do I need to drink a lot of electrolytes or like these sports drinks like Gatorade or Powerade? And the real answer is no. Most of the time, the replenishment of these electrolytes is not necessary if you're doing like a 30-minute workout. But if you're working out for over 45 minutes and you're doing very high intensity cardio where your heart rate is constantly beating, you might, actually you will strongly benefit from these nutrient electrolyte replenishment. So if you're like running a marathon or you're basically, I don't know, swimming for a long time, it's important to potentially re-nourish these. And that's because overall, when we talk about like the optimal balance of liquids in our bodies, that is also talking about having the proper amount of overall hydration. So replenishing your liquids and then having fluid regulation is very important. So that's kind of like the main major focus for electrolytes in our body. Yeah. Now, the next most important thing is understanding what each individual major electrolyte in our body does. So I'm going to be covering quickly, we're going to be covering sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, and then at the end a little bit of chloride, which mostly bonds with sodium. But diving right into it, sodium is a mineral that has the major effects of regulating hydration. So it makes sure that your body stays hydrated. Sorry. And it does that by regulating and then pulling water out of the cells and transferring it throughout the whole body so that it's evenly spread, so that water throughout your body is evenly spread. And then let's see, sodium is also really good for oxygen transportation throughout your body. So if you don't have enough sodium in your body, you may get very tired and very fatigued very quickly. And that's because your cells need oxygen to survive, and it's part of the energy production process of each cell. And so sodium helps transfer oxygen to each individual cell in your body. So that's another important thing. Now, moving on to potassium, this is mostly focused on the strength and firing of muscles. And so sodium and potassium work together in kind of like a pump or an energy generator. because it helps generate electrical potential or electrical channels. And each one of our cells is essentially like a mini battery, because our cells all have electrical charges and they store this energy so that the cells, when they need to perform their function, have energy to actually do whatever function they need to do. And so potassium and sodium help these cells stay charged and energized. And so the pump kind of ensures that the contraction of muscles is constantly firing correctly. Diving into magnesium, so magnesium is normally going to control the absorption of potassium and sodium. And magnesium is normally found in like green leaf plants and green leaf vegetables, or just generally in vegetables. And it controls the absorption of our body of potassium and sodium. It also focuses on so there's magnesium and then there's calcium. Magnesium is very focused on muscle relaxation, while calcium focuses on muscle contraction. And so it's very important to have an accurate or a strong balance between these two particles. And so when you're deficient in magnesium, you will often find yourself getting a lot of cramps because you don't have the major electrolyte that regulates the relaxation of muscles. And so it's very important, if you want to be able to sustain a long workout, you have the proper amount of both magnesium and calcium. And focusing on calcium, it's like I said, focus on the contraction of muscles. But if you have a low amount of calcium, you might not only find that you have like weak grip strength and weak ability to move and contract your muscles, but you might also get cramps, which is kind of counterintuitive. But you will also get cramps because your body doesn't have enough strength to contract, which sends it into a spazzing state. Finally, we have chloride, which normally bonds with sodium and is also mostly focusing on hydration. So to summarize as a whole, an electrolyte is a particle that dissolves in water and becomes electrically charged. That's important because it ensures that these different electrolyte particles are going to be properly regulating the levels of fluid and water in our body so that they are at a balanced level. And what does balance mean? It means that our cells have the proper amount of water inside of them and outside, which is called, a proper osmotic balance. And so the actual causes or functions of electrolytes are for proper liquid balance, hydration, and contraction and relaxation of the muscles through what we talked about in terms of the energy in the cells. That was kind of it. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.